Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is our first brand new live show of the brand new year. Brand new. I guess I'll just keep saying brand new every couple of words and drive the point home. We're live today. We were pre-recorded yesterday, and I guess we fooled everybody, including Joan, who let me know over Twitter, hey, I didn't know you were doing a live show. I would have been available for that, I think. But no, we wanted to give everybody the day off, but we didn't want to leave you without new content because, of course, there's so much happening. Although one of the more interesting ideas now floating is to give you old content, to check out what's been lying around in Pocket. I actually spent a little bit of time both on Tuesday and Wednesday sorting through things. Not that I used any system or anything or made myself any notes, but just taking a look at what's been resting around in Pocket for all this time. And I guess Kate Sherrill liked it an awful lot and even suggested maybe giving it a spin as a regular feature under the name, I like the title, Pocket Lint. I thought that was kind of cute. We might roll with that one of these days. Anyway, Daily Kos Radio is live now. I was just recently informed by Bill in Portland, Maine, who continues into the new year with this tradition. Daily Kos now being live. Of course, it's the first live show of 2020 for me, Kagro X, David Waldman, and his merry band, we'll see how merry they are, of truth seekers. Stay tuned. What happens this year will shock you. Yes, that's true. And I think we threw up a picture of what looked like maybe somebody boiling slices of banana or something, and it's going to be like a pressure wash for your insides as well for 2020. I have to figure out some of these things, what they really mean. Maybe, how about that? An investigative series into what these clickbait ads are actually selling. What is that one thing that is either a pressure wash for your insides or that doctors are begging you not to eat or something or other? I'd love to get to the bottom of all of this. But getting to the truth of these matters, like with most matters, just so difficult these days with what we're up against. There's plenty to round up from the news. Another relatively quiet holiday break, and again in one of those difficult situations coming back from the Wednesday holiday. Very awkward. And I just did see somebody addressing that in my timeline somewhere, saying it was the Mondayest feeling Thursday ever. Of course, it's really, I don't know about ever. It's certainly the Mondayest feeling Thursday since the one we had last week, which not everyone experienced. A lot of people took the balance of the Christmas week off, but it's very difficult, I think, to convince the bosses to give people the balance of the New Year's Day week off. That's just not really that big a holiday, and people don't travel per se for it. Anyway, here we are. We're back. Our first live show, but second new show. Very confusing, but you know how we like to parse things here. So is it the second show? Is it the first show? It feels like the first because it is, but it also, well, you get the idea. All right. So there's lots to round up, and I am certain that Greg is already busy rounding them up. In fact, I can see the evidence of it, which is what we like to look for, especially in an election year. We are also, I guess, now a year away from excitedly anticipating, I hope, the inauguration of a new president, or I don't know what, or hoping that the flu takes the old one or something like that. I'm not really certain what we're supposed to hope for if things don't go correctly or well or whatever your theory is on how this next election is supposed to go. It's also an Olympic year and a leap year, two other exciting little tidbits about 2020. And, I remembered, if you want to feel old, we were over at, if you want to feel like an old and an irresponsible person as well. I remembered the fact that we were celebrating 2020, the arrival of 2020, meant that for people, I guess, thinking back to their college years, you might have missed it. It was the last, perhaps even socially explainable excuse for pulling out the old fortified wine, the old what used to be known in the day as the Mad Dog 2020. I don't know how it really got that. I mean, I guess it came from the MD initials, which is really for Mogan David and not Mad Dog, but everyone thought that sounded tougher. I don't know what the 2020 is about. Maybe that's the amount of alcohol they boosted this stuff by, but you missed your chance. So if you were ever looking for that, I guess you have to wait for a new year that makes some reference to, I don't know what, Boone's Farm or the Night Train or something, and I don't think that's going to happen. Not as readily as the numbers. That's the system we usually use for keeping track of years. All right, Greg Dworkin is here, probably finishing off the rest of his fortified wine before getting ready for his roundup. Good morning, Greg. Uh-oh, I can't hear you. I now detect a problem. What is the issue? Why don't I hear you? That's a good question. Let me see if I can figure out what that might be.
Hey, any better?
Yes, that is better.
Good.
It sounds like you figured it. Yes, I think I heard the problem. Click.
Click.
Got
yep.
it.
I turned off the microphone because my son's dog is visiting, my granddog, and so Abby and Saki were arguing.
I see.
And I thought it was best to have that not on the show, and then I forgot to turn the microphone back on.
Well,
do not try this at home, folks. We are total professionals here.
I'm scrambling like, oh no, what button could this be for me?
It is a button, but
yes.
It was mine, not yours.
Who's got the button? You do. All right.
So, you know what?
Yes.
The year is 1920.
It is?
Yeah, look at the anti-Semitism.
Oh, yeah, all right. I thought I missed 100 years somewhere.
Yeah,
I misplaced it. I'll be right back. Yeah, it feels like that. And I don't know about the roaring part. Yeah, the fires are roaring in Australia, if that's what they meant.
Right. All my ophthalmology friends are like thrilled, 2020 and 2020.
Yes, they can't wait.
They can't wait.
And all the...
In fact, a lot of the telephone numbers you call to make an eye doctor appointments, like, 1-800-da-da-da-2020.
Yeah, I'm thinking the laser eye surgery advertisements are going to go crazy.
All right,
this
off
is
the
the
roof,
year. Right, okay.
So I'm going to do just a few topics this morning and maybe an abbreviated chat in this holiday period, kind of still recovering. So first of all, let's look at what's currently on the New York Times front page.
All right, I will look.
That's my first item here. I just took a screenshot of it, so you don't even have to look. Analysis, new flare-ups of familiar crises usher in New Year for Trump. President Trump bet he could isolate Iran and charm North Korea, but it hasn't worked. The nation seemed to sense the vulnerability of a president under impeachment and facing re-election, and neither seems to fear him. In other words, you can try to sell vaporware to the Trump base who will buy anything. But actual real people who know what's going on say this is nonsense. Let's go back to the so-called Trump win at the Singapore summit with our friend from North Korea. Right? It was just so terribly discouraging to watch cable news and others go all in on sending people there and make it a big reality TV thing when nothing was accomplished. We all knew nothing was accomplished. All the experts told us nothing was accomplished. And they insisted on playing it as a Trump win because there's no reason. And in fact, the way it was played over on MSNBC during the New Year's break was really galling. It was like, well, Trump won the summit, but of course everything's gone downhill since. Nothing happened at the summit. It was never a win in the first place. Now, other examples of how the news media does this to the detriment of the United States is, for example, NAFTA 2.0, a terrible arrangement that Pelosi and the Democrats renegotiated. Oh, well, this is a big win for Trump. It wasn't a win for Trump. First of all, most people don't care and don't pay attention after the 24 hours of the headlines are gone. And secondly, the only reason it exists in its current form is thanks to Democrats. So none of that is a, quote, win for Trump. And actually, you haven't really heard a lot about it since, which kind of proves the point. Here's another one that isn't a win for Trump, impeachment. Impeachment didn't cause a backlash. What it did do is actually some kind of interesting things. And I got a nice Jonathan Bernstein article on that, which I think is worth going over.
All right.
What is Trump's approval rating telling us? Well, before we do that, let's just look at some of those numbers. Today, Steady Eddie on the impeachment numbers. Civics says 51 support impeachment, 46 opposed. Would you support or oppose impeaching Donald Trump is the exact question.
I would.
And over at the MSN poll, which remember uses a slightly different wording, do you support or oppose the Senate voting to remove President Trump from office? I like that one because I figure most people don't know what impeachment is, or at least a good chunk of them don't. I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people don't. And they currently are also Steady Eddie. They got 54% support voting to remove the president and 40% saying, no, don't do that. This at a time that his approved, disapproved numbers are pretty steady, and that's what we're going to talk about with Jonathan Bernstein. Disapproved 51, approved 44, and that's been very steady for months and months, if not years. If the presidential election from MSN were held today, who would you vote for? Poll result, 49% say the Democratic candidate, 42% say President Trump, and interestingly, YouGov's latest generic ballot has the Democrats up by 10.
Is it a congressional generic?
It just
ballot,
is generic,
just,
just who would you vote for, Democrat or Republican? So it's generic congressional.
Generic everything. All right.
But it could be generic everything. I didn't look at the exact wording of the question, but the point there is Trump is simply historically not doing particularly well, despite the fact that the media would have it as it's a big win because Trump's approval is at 43, but his disapproval has been like 55. They never hone in on that more important number.
And it's bigger number, too. I thought that they were into the big stuff.
So what is Trump's approval rating telling us? Impeachment hasn't much affected the president's popularity, but his numbers are still historically bad. And again, to be in context, why don't we just go ahead and look at 538's aggregate, to be fair. 52.9% disapprove, 42.6% approve. Again, pretty steady.
Okay.
So Bernstein goes on to say something important. The level of disapproval is highly unusual. Trump's been at or above 52% disapproval for almost his entire presidency. Most previous polling era presidents either never touched 50 in the first 4 years or only did so briefly. Only H.W. Bush and Carter spent more than a few weeks above the 50% mark during their first term. Both of them lost, by the way. The good news for Trump, although some predicted that impeachment would drive his approval numbers down, there's no sign of that. His popularity is basically as stable as ever, and that means that there's very little electoral pressure on Republicans to abandon him. It's possible then that Jonathan Bernstein's speculation last spring was correct. When Democrats moved toward impeachment, it had the effect of pushing voters who actively disliked Trump to support impeaching and removing him. That's why the numbers bounced up. But the process has focused voters on the question of whether the president should be ousted, not whether his actions were improper. In fact, that's true. The public already agrees. Majority, pretty strong majority, like 70%, 71%, his actions were improper.
Yes.
That frame makes it more likely that marginal Trump supporters will back him since it raises the stakes of opposing him. That's not to say impeaching Trump was a mistake for Democrats, just that it was never likely to be a good way of lowering his approval rate. And if that's correct, then Trump's upcoming trial in the Senate probably won't hurt his approval rating either unless high-profile Republicans, especially Republican senators, turn against them. And if that happens, it'll have to be because the weight of the evidence or other disagreements with Trump, public opinion isn't going to do it. But there's a corollary to that I would add, and that is that people expecting, when the election comes, everybody knows that polls tighten and everybody goes to their corner. I'm saying they're already in their corner. This is just a fancy way of saying impeachment's already pushed people, if you're a leaner, to declare where you're at.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right? So when you get to, there's going to be a 10-point increase because everybody knows you rally around. They've already rallied. This is as far as he gets. It doesn't get
interesting thought. It makes a strategic case for impeachment.
We've talked about it on the show. But, of course, this is just a different way of getting to the same point. So maybe those numbers are actually just as frozen as they appear.
Okay.
That's not good for Trump. That's not a win.
No.
Yes, but what about the Electoral College? Those are just bad numbers.
Yeah. I mean, There's always the Electoral College. It is weird, but they do have to. Well, technically, they're supposed to have to deal with how the election goes first.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying. When you look at these numbers, there's nothing encouraging about it. Now, Trump's raising a ton of money. So did W. That was a pretty close election as well in 2004, although Kerry lost because he lost Ohio. But, there's no question that these numbers are telling us, and, probably the civics numbers are closer to the truth than the MSN numbers. But they're telling us that the majority of people disapprove of Trump will probably not vote for him. And you can win with 46% of the vote. It's tough to do it with 42, even with the Electoral College advantage.
I don't know that that's been done.
Well, we'll see. But, we also have another year of Trump screwing up. Now, there's all sorts of, we know the known knowns. We know some of the known unknowns, like what's going to happen to the economy. We don't know the unknown unknowns, like what happens if North Korea and Iran actually wind up getting into a shooting war with us. But that first comment that I made about the other countries actively not paying too much attention to Trump, and certainly he doesn't scare them, is true. And in fact, a lot of Americans have caught on that it's all a con.
Oh.
Trump is trying to do foreign policy the way he does real estate. Try to bully you into a bad deal and then running away if it doesn't work. But, that's not how it works when you're president of the country. He doesn't know that because he's a crime syndicate head.
Yes. So he would never have learned this?
Right. So Anyway, that's the background here. And then the other topic that I wanted to cover, not because the clip itself is all that important, but just the concept.
All right.
It's a clip of Joe Biden circulating, suggesting that he thought white nationalist ideas were good.
That seems odd.
Deceptively edited and passed around, it has been suggested by some Bernie people.
Oh. Well,
Deepfakes
maybe.
haven't quite entered our dystopian mediascape just yet, says New York Magazine. Selective edits are proving to be a problem, as shown by a deceptively cut video of Joe Biden suggesting an idea consistent with white nationalism, which made the rounds on social media Wednesday night. That was last night. Our culture is, you got to keep up, right? Our culture is not imported from some African nation or some Asian nation, says the clip. It's our English jurisprudential culture, our European culture. That's it.
Okay.
Out of context, the statement fits comfortably within the confines of white nationalist rhetoric. But the quote is from a March 2019 speech in which Biden expressed his regrets for the role he played in the Clarence Thomas hearings. And he said he wanted to change that culture.
Oh, how did he even get to that from Clarence Thomas? Oh, I guess you would know if you could see the whole video clip.
So videos stripped of their context were a frequent concern last year, including an RNC cut of a comment by Kirsten Gillibrand suggesting New York senator wanted to expand Social Security to undocumented immigrants. Ilhan Omar was a frequent target, including an instance in which Senator Marco Rubio tweeted out a video of Omar saying Americans should be more fearful of white men without any mention of her discussion of attacks by right-wing extremists killing 4 times as many Americans as Islamist extremists between 2009 and 2018. That such a video emerged on the first day of 2020 suggests us how prevalent the practice is likely to be in the coming election year. Now, here's the thing I found most interesting, a reminder from Dave Weigel. The little tempest over that Biden, quote, culture, end quote, video reminds me of one of the best 2016 stories, Ashley Parker on a GOP group attacking Clinton from the left and getting immediately amplified by actual left-wingers.
Yes.
The right baits the left to turn against Hillary Clinton. In digital campaigns, conservative groups are sending a steady stream of posts attacking Hillary Rodham Clinton, some of them specifically designed to be spotlighted.
Yes, that does sound familiar.
And so it's horrible, but it happens. And then Julian Zelzer, historian, says, unfortunately, heavily edited clips are going to be a big part of the 2020 election and beyond. It's essential that everybody in the media and the rest of the world of commentary check, recheck, or verify before sharing video or audio about any politician. Now, this particular clip, as Jed Schuckerman pointed out, was maliciously edited, taken utterly out of context, has the full video, and Biden is saying the opposite. The point there, of course, isn't so much this particular video that nobody's going to pay attention to. It's the concept of what they're trying to do. And interestingly, Imana Gandhi, Angry Blank Lady, says, look, this is clearly targeted at black voters.
Okay, yes.
Right. They're the group that this thing is being sent to in order to try to persuade them to drop Biden.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
I guess. Yeah, all right. I'm wrestling with the idea that, I didn't read anything about who's suggesting who sent it, but that you had mentioned that, I guess somebody says that they think Bernie people, or are we talking about just like random Bernie fans?
I don't think they,
or,
no, I don't know.
We don't even think they really
the
did
suggestion
it,
of somebody high-ranking in the campaign at least retweeted it. I haven't gotten that far. I'm just trying to follow the whole.
Yeah, I don't. All right.
Here.
Okay, I mean, because it certainly fits with the old Russian MO too. Although interestingly,
or whether it's a supporter.
Yeah, it could be
anybody. It
doesn't
matter anymore.
Could be a 400-pound guy.
It winds up getting amplified.
Yes. All right. Well, we don't want that. It was certainly tamped down on quickly in my corner.
It's not. I mean, that's why I mean it's
not
just a little
everywhere.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah. All right.
At all. It's done. It's finished.
I certainly saw the
point is
rebuttal
what
before
happened.
The clip. Yes, that can happen, and it can happen.
It's going
anywhere,
to happen.
You don't know
People
who's
are doing this all the time. Be careful about what you go ahead and tweet or retweet or believe. Verify it yourself.
I guess so. Including who? I guess we'll have to also expand that to who retweeted that. We'll have to find out.
Well, it's. I didn't want to jump down the entire rabbit hole and go follow it. Again, it's not that important to story.
Then I will stop. How about that?
But the important part of it is that it exists and that it happened.
Yes. All right. I will accept that as the important part.
Right.
I think that's true.
News breaking.
Yes.
Julian Castro is ending his run for president.
He is. I just saw that. That's too bad. A lot of people are doing that.
He was very good. He was an absolutely qualified candidate. He's far more qualified than Marianne Williamson or Andrew Yang. But you know what else is? You're talking about what's coming in a month. 1 month.
Yes.
Like February 3rd is the Iowa caucus. So I guess there's only one more debate, and it's probably only going to be the top 5.
I see. So he wasn't maybe going to be in that debate, and so he figured.
Yep.
Okay. Because
that plus money.
This is the stage where I think, why don't you hold on until Iowa? But I guess if you're also getting the message, you're also not really going to register in Iowa. You're not going to get any delegates. And why not just get out now and not be embarrassed at coming away with 0?
The Democratic nominee for president is going to be
Yes.
Biden.
Oh, all right.
Bernie.
Oh, I see. There's more.
Warren. Yes. Buttigieg, who's no longer mayor, or Amy Klobuchar. It's going to be one of those 5.
Is his mayoral term over now because of the turnover of the new year? Okay.
Yep, ended yesterday.
Well. So
he's not Mayor Pete anymore. He's former Mayor Pete.
Yeah, okay. That's more letters.
Or the Pete who used to be known as mayor.
Is there a symbol for that?
I think so. There's a glyph.
All right, we'll come up with one. There needs to be one person, at least at all times, who names themselves that way.
Yeah, the Pete formerly known as mayor.
And there's been many years where there hasn't. So I guess that's not true. Never mind. Okay.
Anyway, so that's the background. That's what's going on. Pardon me for a moment.
Sure. And your comment. Yes, okay. Well, we have to talk to both dogs. If we talk to one, we got to talk to both. So I can understand the necessity of muting for this one.
Well, it's traffic up and down the street here on this particular occasion. So you may hear Abby in the background. She's got her own views of who should be president, but she said, "I'm not telling you what it is, at least until after Iowa."
Yes. All right. Well, good.
Another thing that people have noticed, by the way, there's a lot less. The proper term is there are fewer. Polls now compared to years past. We don't know what's going on in Iowa as well as we used to because there haven't been as many polls. So at this particular point in time, everybody's waiting on the Des Moines Register and see what Ann Seltzer has to say about Iowa.
That is interesting. Why are there fewer?
Money.
Yeah, okay.
Things are expensive.
I mean, there are more debates, more television and other internet news outlets, and yet less polls. It's an
People also track, the number of endorsements and, of course, the amount of money raised. But not just the amount of money raised, the number of donors. right? Bernie's going to post and has posted some very impressive how much money did I make this quarter numbers. But the important thing to remember about Bernie is that it's from an enormous small donor base.
Yes.
So the number of donors is always very high. That's why Bernie endorses.
That's the important thing.
Right? Biden will get his share of money, but not so many donors.
Yes, that is true. And, you find your right balance there somewhere. It's important. The number of small donors. I mean, you don't have to donate very much money in order to remember to go vote.
Right.
You don't have to donate anything, really. But
anyway, they're all in the race. Any one of them could win. Nobody really knows who's ahead. But there's some interesting Mason-Dixon polling out looking at Florida and Virginia, suggesting a closer race with Biden leading Trump, but the others trailing. But I would remind people, if I'm not mistaken, I have to triple check this, I don't think Mason-Dixon waits for education. And if you don't wait for education, sometimes you get wrong numbers. It's a good pollster, solid pollster, but I'm very skeptical of these numbers, saying that Virginia is going to be close with Biden leading by just a few points.
Okay.
I'll give you the exact numbers. In Virginia, Mason-Dixon said Trump is over the mayor formerly known as Pete by 2 points, and Trump beats Sanders by 6. Trump beats Warren by 4, but loses to Biden by only 4 points in Virginia. And in Florida, similar numbers. Biden beats Trump by 2. That's believable. It's Florida. Warren loses by 9. Sanders loses by 5. And the Pete formerly known as mayor loses by 4. So Florida will be close, but the idea that Virginia and Florida are equally close, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's why I have to wait by education.
Okay. But we haven't done that yet. All right.
Virginia's more educated.
Okay. Well, education, key topic, of course. We'll be back in 2 minutes to discuss it some more. Speaking of education, we'll also note the passing of Jack Sheldon, the writer of many of the Schoolhouse Rock videos and some of the most important ones with respect to democratic governance as well. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support.
Anyway, these were...
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Edwards Radio. All right, let's jump right in here. I know you're taking a look around the news landscape, and it has been kind of quiet. Trump.
Well, it's been a holiday and all of that. We're not yet in a shooting war, so the embassy occupation in Iraq. Where protesters, what happened is that the U.S. decided to bomb a compound that had Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and they took them out, but unfortunately they also took out some Iraqis, and Iraq wasn't happy about it, and so they wound up trying to occupy the American embassy in Iraq. Does that sound familiar? Yes. I mean, this is the whole problem here. Iraq has very close ties with Iran, and so the idea that you just separate them, the U.S. went in there not knowing the difference between Shia and Sunni, for example, and you have an Iraqi government which is weak and wants both the Americans to leave because now ISIS has been defeated, and wants the Americans to stay because they're afraid there are sleeper cells and ISIS isn't totally defeated. So Obama tried to pull out. That didn't work out. ISIS is now certainly back on their heels, but not finished. What to do is unclear. So some Iraqis want the U.S. to pull out and are pushing for that. And, the presence of Americans in Iraq at this particular point in time has never been made clear as to what the mission is and how long they're going to stay and so on and so forth, because it's very impolitic to just say, well, we're just propping up the government.
Yeah, I guess that's
everybody kind of knows that, and that's one of the reasons why they want them out. So that incident, seems to be over because the protester leaders appear to have called it off, having made their point. And, of course, Trump has no plan, and that's one of the reasons why everybody who is interested in international affairs thinks he's a disaster as a president, and those who aren't paying attention and just care about the racism don't really care until or unless their own family members have to go clean up the mess. So that's something to keep an eye on. But while all that's happening,
yes,
we started the show with impeachment today, and why don't we end it for my segment? And we'll do Neil Katyal. He's got a nice thread on impeachment and the removal in the new year. He says the conventional wisdom is that the Republicans in the Senate will rush to acquit Trump. I outline here why I think that overstates the case and that the process has any number of variables in which things may change. At some point, Nancy Pelosi next week may actually send over those articles of impeachment. Trump wants you to believe that the outcome is preordained. By the way, are they hand-delivered? Is that one of those things we have to do by document?
Right, yeah. They'll be carried over by messenger. It's not a big deal, which we talked about a little bit.
I wonder if they'll cover it on cable the way they do like the O.J. Simpson chase.
Well, it is just about as slow. If they did it by car through the hallway, that would be something to see.
Yeah, exactly. Trump wants you to believe, says Katyal, that the outcome is preordained, but it's not, particularly when he acts the way he does. In short, he acts like a guilty man. First, the facts. Trump has done something that no one else has done, not even Nixon. Categorically blocked all witnesses and documents in impeachment. That's how a guilty man behaves. Nixon's support looked strong through the start of impeachment, but it crumbled. Trump has outed the whistleblower by name. Is that how an innocent man behaves? He did that in a retweet. Trump has never been able to come up with a coherent story for why the aid to Ukraine was suspended. I don't have space to deal all of that here, but my book goes through all of his shifting explanations in detail. Now, why should any of those pesky facts matter to the Senate, particularly one controlled by Mitch McConnell, who has publicly pledged to move in lockstep with the White House and acquit the president? Well, first, because even McConnell has no appreciation for a system of law. Others do. His statements blatantly violate his oath, which requires him to do impartial justice, and our Constitution puts the Chief Justice in charge of the trial. Chief Justice Roberts will strive to do impartial justice, even if McConnell won't. His New Year's Eve statement was characteristic. And then he has a subtweet here. A timely message from our Chief Justice. We should reflect on our duty to judge without fear of favor, deciding each matter with humility, integrity, and dispatch. Second, he didn't have to put that up, Roberts, but he did. Second, the case for blocking the witnesses is a really hard one. McConnell looks like he's protecting a guilty man. This weekend's revelations in the New York Times make McConnell's position increasingly untenable. That's the one where everybody was trying to gang up on Trump to try to get him to change his mind about the Ukraine holding up of money. It's pretty clear Trump did exactly what he was accused of. And the reason those leaked to the paper is that all the other perps are trying to cover their own butt. Third, Dems are giving Trump what he wanted. During House proceedings, Trump said he wanted witnesses to testify, just in the Senate, not the House. The Dems have called him on it. Bait and switch now? Trump is acting even more like a guilty man because he's afraid.
That's a good point.
It's no surprise Lisa Murkowski raised concerns. Senator Collins announced she's open to witnesses. I expect pressure to build. Mitt Romney will be critical. Ultimately, I can see a resolution leaving these questions to Roberts. Trump's actions, which look, smell, and sound like that of a guilty man, are just the start. He's becoming increasingly erratic, stumbling into lawbreaking, like revealing the whistleblower identity and the like. Why is that lawbreaking? It's not against the law to reveal somebody's name, but it is against the law to try to intimidate them. I think we covered that on another show. And that is why we see Trump support cracking in quarter after quarter, Christianity Today, influential conservatives like Ramesh Ponnuru. Apart from witnesses, longstanding Senate impeachment rules say the president is summoned to appear in the Senate when impeached. Trump should testify. If he thinks he did nothing wrong, say it under oath. That's what innocent people do day in and day out. I've never felt the case for impeachment is political. It's based on the rule of law. Whether it hurts Dems or helps Republicans is besides the point. It's our duty. People like me just want process. It's a process guy.
Yeah,
A real
I want
trial.
results.
Both sides make their case. And the thing that gets me the most is that Trump is behaving like a guilty man. If this were such an easy case as he claims, he should do what every other American does, face justice and tell his story. The fact that he's afraid to do that speaks volumes. He's afraid of the truth. He's afraid of you and me knowing the truth. And there is hope that our Senate will see that. Well, there's hope. Doesn't mean it'll happen, but there's hope.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
It's always hope.
Could happen.
Yeah.
There's a couple of points where I would differ, but okay.
That's his view.
Right. Well, it's a great conversational thread.
Well, here's
That's
another
the
one,
point of it.
but this is on the same theme,
Oh.
just a little bit more eyes wide open, and that's from Greg Sargent. Trump is openly calling for his trial to be as corrupt as possible.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I did see that one, and I believe read that into our Wednesday show, but it's worth reiterating.
Yeah. Well, case in point, Trump is openly calling for his impeachment trial to be converted into something that's purely devoted to serving his own political needs, one that only includes witnesses that'll help him keep smearing potential 2020 opponent Joe Biden, but has no meaningful relevance whatsoever to the corrupt conduct for which he has been impeached.
Yeah.
Now, people will say, oh, well, this is both sides and it's going to be bad for Joe Biden. Actually, what this is really telling us is that Biden's in a pretty good position to be his opponent.
I guess so. Yeah. I wonder what would happen. I mean,
I don't see him going after Klobuchar.
No, that's true, right? And I mean, it's not like he's only doing it because he has actual reason to believe there's some evidence of wrongdoing by Biden.
course
They're
he
creating that.
But
he
he's
could
given up
create it against
attacking Warren.
Klobuchar.
He hardly ever attacks Bernie.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I guess he just believes.
He just throws out socialism, but he doesn't really go after Bernie by name.
Yeah.
But that's because a lot of
would
Bernie
if he had
supporters
to.
are Trump supporters if Bernie doesn't win.
Maybe that's I don't know how many, but certainly
Not a
more
majority.
than others,
Just
except for
a chunk.
Tulsi.
It's
I
a
guess.
small chunk.
Tulsi would have more of those.
Tulsi would have more of this, without question.
But
she has overall a whole lot less.
No reason to attack her at the moment. But yeah, I mean, sometimes that gets pointed out, but obviously if Bernie were the nominee, then you would see those attacks.
Then you would see those attacks. I mean, not totally. It's just interesting. Is he angling to run against Bernie, so he's attacking everybody else? Is that the campaign strategy? I don't know.
Could be.
But I know he doesn't want to run against Biden.
Doesn't
We
look
know
like
that
it.
because he
Or-
says he wants to run against Biden.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the definitive proof. I was going to say, well, maybe he'd like to because he's got great things to make up about him. But all right, he says he
Yeah, Biden is beating
wants to, so he
Trump in
doesn't.
every poll, and so Trump wants to run against him. I don't think so.
Okay, I'll buy that. All right. Well, anything else that we want to add in here? I'm trying to.
No,
scan
I
around,
think that's
but-
pretty much it.
Okay.
On a quiet day, I think that's most of it. Keep an eye on what's going on in Iran, Iraq. I think it's important.
One of those.
Anything else? Brett Stevens still has a job. That's too bad.
Yeah.
Here's a nice one.
Yes.
It's Nancy Cohen writing in the New York Times. Republican women are in crisis. In the past 10 years, they've become an endangered species on the political stage.
Republican women. Okay.
That's in a pundit roundup from Wednesday.
Okay.
Because I did a special one yesterday.
All right. There was
There
the.
it is.
Okay.
With the exception of her endorsement of Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, Ms. Palin played a minor role in 2014. Most signs suggest the Republican pragmatism would prevail. The rise of Donald Trump eliminated any chance of that. The signs of women's disillusionment with the party were immediate. One day after President Trump's inauguration, an estimated 4 million people, mostly women, participated in hundreds of women's marches throughout the U.S. In the months that followed, women mobilized to defeat Republicans at the federal, state, and local levels. In the 2018 midterms, every Republican congresswoman from the 2014 class, except for Ms. Stefanik, lost. Martha McSally was defeated, though she was appointed, and still faces a tough election battle, and just goes through the vanishing Republican woman Congress critter.
Yeah. Okay. That's
So
certainly
also a
Palin.
reminder that the Democratic base, is weighted toward women. The resistance is heavily weighted toward women, and women vote more than men do, and so we'll see the fruits of that in about a year.
Yes.
11
Okay.
months.
I can get behind that.
Less than a year away
Palin
for the
even
election.
show up in all this?
Just about a month away before Iowa, and that's where we leave it with you, who will take us
right.
for the whole hour and 15 minutes of whatever it is you want to talk about.
Okay. And by the way, the New York Times editorial content algorithm might need some work. I opened up the article you're talking about here. Republican women are in crisis, and you know how they have on the sidebar, editors' picks, the other stories that you should go and look at. If you're looking at this one, you might also want to see, basically. Let's see. There's 3 stories that they pick. One has been widely read. The Sweethearts Forever. Then came Alzheimer's, Murder, and Suicide, which is a great human interest story all by itself. But I can see that I'm worried about what they think of as the female angle. Because the third of the 3 stories is the best bras might be made in Poland. That is a new one on me, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like, oh, women in politics. Well, okay, now that we have your attention, bras. Or, why not shopping and cooking features as well? I thought that was like, maybe you want to put a tweak in that algorithm and serve them something substantive. Not that that isn't of concern, just not immediately following the story about the disappearing Republican woman. But all right. Just thought I would note that for the record. Good job there, algorithm writers. I have a feeling that algorithm programmers might be kind of like a 90% male thing. So,
I don't know.
I don't know either. But the women, if there are any there, should be, they should be the bosses so that they can fix this thing. But I don't know how well that's going to work.
So anyway, there you have it. Take
All
care,
right.
and I will talk to you, I guess, on Monday.
That's a good time for it. We'll set that down in pencil and trace over it in pen later on.
I'm going to go take a look at this Biden piece and really see if anybody has really nailed down where it came from.
I would be interested
because that's
to know.
bothersome. It's a bothersome inference that I don't have proof for other than seeing it said. And the whole point was don't repeat stuff you haven't traced down.
Right.
So let's go trace it down, and maybe we'll talk about it on Monday.
That sounds like so responsible. I love it. You should do that because I don't have time for that kind of responsibility.
Exactly. Well, one of us has to do it.
I would like
You're
to
busy.
hear about
You do
that.
a show, you know.
I'll report it if you do it. Good. Original reporting on Kagro in the morning.
All righty. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Do the same. I'll have a good
I can't say
weekend.
I'll talk to you next year. So I'll talk to you
Right.
next week.
Well, hopefully you will. You'll all have to wait to find out. That's the classic Greg Dworkin segment ending. We're just gonna have to wait and see.
We'll just have to wait and see. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Very good. We'll see whether I take care. I haven't yet. So, okay. Let's see. Much to round up. Let's see. We got the breaking news of Julian Castro dropping out of the campaign, and that is sad, not unexpected, of course, just, given the realities of campaigning, but it really would have been nice if he could have hung in there, and we are whitening up the field a bit, aren't we? These things do tend to happen, since so much of it is driven by money, and so much of the money movement is driven by, I don't know what I will say, a familiarities that happen to very often break down along less than comfortable demographic lines. That's one way of saying it. Okay. Let's see. Lots of things put aside in pocket, and I want to see what's there and kind of remember what we did over the last couple of days so I can figure out what did I retweet that I thought was interesting but didn't make it to pocket. And I think the reason I'm thinking about that is I think the Neil Katyal thread and the few places where I felt like I differed with his conclusions reminds me also of another, not a thread, but at least a comment that was widely shared over the weekend. Let's try and fill out the middle segment here with that. I want to start back at the top with Neil Katyal. Right. So conventional wisdom, he said, starting out, was that the Republicans in the Senate will rush to acquit Trump. I outline here why I think that overstates the case and that the process has any number of variables in which things may change. By the way, I guess also, as Greg mentioned, it is possible that those articles of impeachment show up in the Senate as early as this week. No indication that I have seen, and Greg, if you have got one, please feel free to share it. No indication that I've seen that they're slated to show up this early. But we did warn you heading into the tail end of last year. One, that the fact that the articles hadn't showed up in the Senate yet wasn't necessarily responsible for changing anything about the way that they're doing things in the Senate. The trial was never anticipated and never scheduled in Mitch McConnell's mind to start any sooner than the beginning of next week anyway. And so the decision not to send the articles to the Senate didn't materially affect, or need not necessarily materially affect the way the Senate approaches its thinking in organizing for the trial. The articles don't have, the withholding the articles doesn't do anything, if at all, if it doesn't delay the start of the trial. That's what it's capable of doing. And I think the implication of the delay was that the House was willing to use that leverage to delay the start of a trial. But we would never actually know until the start of until the trial actually began, or until the beginning of the trial was slated out, whether or not that had actually been the case. So it's got two sides to it. On the one hand, for instance, the initial Republican reaction to the delay was, they're trying to screw with the way the Senate is going to hold its trial, and either that's not their right, that's not their prerogative, or I'm afraid that they'll force us to have witnesses and I don't want there to be witnesses. Whatever the fear was, it was unfounded, because the thinking was that negotiations between the parties in the Senate as to how the trial would go was not slated to begin until at least next Monday, the 6th. And so really, unless the articles took longer to arrive than would land them there on the 6th, then there was, in the end, going to be no impact materially on how the Senate handled the process for deciding what to do, even. So it was an overreaction on the part of Republicans right from the beginning if their complaint was, anything other than immediate delivery materially impacts how we do things. Now, there's a strategic impact, knowing that just putting the message out there that the House was willing to use this as leverage made it leverage in itself. We now need to focus on asking Republican members of the Senate whether they are going to hold out for demanding witnesses, or whether they are ever going to demand witnesses, or are they going to fall in line with McConnell and vote to go ahead with the trial without witnesses because that's what McConnell wants. There was never really any serious indication that the requisite number of Republicans would hold out from a McConnell demand of a trial with no witnesses. I think they would need 4. And so far, people have only been able to come up with 3 names that had any serious possibility of holding out, I guess. So we thought Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. Collins, of course, is never a serious threat at holding out on anything. Mitt Romney is also a pretty big question mark in all this. I mean, for a guy who made a show of being a Trump resistor, he's knuckled under pretty good when the opportunity was there, including, showing up for that embarrassing lunch or dinner or whatever that meal was that he had with Trump. So that was kind of embarrassing. And as senator, he hasn't really done much in the way of standing up to Trump either. Murkowski has a slightly better track record and maybe is someone you can possibly be willing to bet a few bucks on. But that's not 4. Even if you get all 3, which you won't because one of them is Susan Collins, that's still less than 4. You could come up with a wild card somewhere, I suppose, but I don't really know who I would think that would be. Some of the usual suspects have just been, in the tank for Trump for no real reason. I mean, you might think about Ted Cruz because he's got reason to be angry with Trump, but he's knuckled under for him pretty good. You used to be able to think about Rand Paul in that role, but he too has fallen into line. Lindsey Graham, of course, lost cause, but he does occasionally make noises about doing things in, traditionally fair ways. Mike Lee, maybe, but he's been kind of quiet, but he'd surprise me because he's really not shown up on the other side very often at all. So I don't know. Anyway, like I said, not delivering the articles of impeachment hasn't yet delayed anything and might not delay anything at all. And I guess you should be prepared for that possibility that if those articles do show up, then there will have been no delay in the end. And if you bet too much on this strategy making Nancy Pelosi by itself, this one action, making her a hero of the Republic, okay. I advised you not to bet that much on it. Maybe a small bet, but I guess a couple of bucks would be down the tubes on that one. And, I don't know what to tell you. A lot of people could end up finding themselves very disappointed to see those articles of impeachment delivered this week or next. So, but be prepared for that. Let's see. Down at I thought I heard... all right. Greg had made some comment here that said expectation is next week when folks are back. I guess that would be the delivery of the articles of impeachment, which, is pretty much when you would otherwise have expected them to be delivered. I did check, just for the record, on the impeachment articles adopted by the Republican House against President Bill Clinton back in 1998, and they messaged them over on the same day. I mean, they were very anxious to get those to the Senate. So it is possible to get it done in a day. There aren't that many other examples to look at. There aren't any records that I could find readily online about how long it took to message the Senate on the Johnson impeachment. And, of course, we never got to that stage in Nixon, so there's really very little to go on. But, I mean, it's very frequently the case that resolutions or bills take a couple of days in order to be scrubbed thoroughly and engrossed properly and then be sent over to the Senate for their consideration. They fairly frequently can do it within a couple of hours, too, but nothing out of the ordinary here. So, I don't know. That's going to take the shine off of the whole strategic idea. Although, we got the benefit of the bargain. We drove Trump up the wall for a couple of days, and he blurted out some dumb stuff, and we got these emerging stories, although they were going to emerge too. Had we delivered the articles of impeachment within an hour, this story presumably would still have come out in the New York Times, and we still wouldn't have begun the trial, and we still wouldn't have a clear idea of what the trial was going to be like, and the Senate wouldn't have voted on it because they were going to be out of session. It was very unlikely to come out any other way. So on the other hand, I guess if you're really looking for a saving point here for Nancy Pelosi to make her the master strategist, you're not totally out of line and you're not totally lost here. Consider this. This is the way it was going to go anyway. And this is the time that those articles of impeachment were likely to have been delivered anyway. And the Senate wasn't going to budge anyway. But by announcing out of the blue, blurting out, we're not going to deliver those articles of impeachment yet because X, that became the story for 2 weeks. It didn't have to be that story. And as we pointed out at the beginning, one of the other strategic benefits of doing this was if you turn over those articles of impeachment, the person to whom the press would naturally run to ask the question, what comes next, which is the question everyone wants answered, would be the person who was in possession of the football, as it were. And in this case, in that case, it would have been Mitch McConnell. And why allow Mitch McConnell 2 weeks to set the narrative on impeachment when it could be Nancy Pelosi setting the narrative for impeachment for those 2 weeks? So for that reason alone, it was a good idea. And maybe that reason alone, if it turns out to be the case that those articles are coming over this week or next. So, I don't know. You might be disappointed, but I guess you don't have to be too disappointed. They got the benefit of the bargain here. All right. So, I think we got through one paragraph of Neil Katyal. So, we didn't get to the parts where I actually disagreed. We can try that. There aren't that many of them. Let's see if I can even skip on down. I don't have to reread the whole thing. We can roll down to... let's see. All the evidence that he's behaving as a guilty person might. I don't have any disagreement with that, nor about Trump never being able to come up with a coherent story for why the Ukraine aid was suspended. A little plug for his book in there. And, then he sets up the question, which I guess we'll suspend until after the next break. Why should any of those pesky facts matter to a Senate, particularly one controlled by Mitch McConnell, who has publicly pledged to move in lockstep with the White House and acquit the president? That's the key point, by the way, for when we move over to discussing other issues about how to handle procedure once those articles make their way over to the Senate and they prepare for the trial. But let's see. Oh, yes, right. This is where it begins to be a little strange. Neil says, first, because even McConnell has no appreciation, or I guess I would say even though McConnell has no appreciation for our system of law, others do. And that is true that others do. His statements blatantly violate his oath, or will anyway when he takes it, which requires him to do impartial justice. That's true. And our Constitution puts the Chief Justice, here's the part, in charge of the impeachment trial. And that's true to an extent. But remember, we also warned you that if you're depending on the Chief Justice to act the hero here, that has really not been his role historically and not one he cherishes. But he's in charge, under the rules set out for him by the Senate. And you know how he is about balls and strikes. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Don't know if we got all of that comment, that brief comment, that critical brief comment in before the break, but I was saying, okay, so the Constitution puts the Chief Justice in charge of the impeachment trial, but you have to look a little deeper into what that actually means. He will be the presiding officer, I think, is undisputed. I think it's undisputed. I mean, it should be undisputed. It's there in black and white in the Constitution. No one has disputed it yet, but this is the Trump administration we are talking about, and they are liable to put themselves on the opposite side of black letter law any time. But so far, no one has objected to that. But he'll be in charge of the impeachment trial as presiding officer. And there are two basic models for how to preside over a body like the Senate. One is the chicken crap model, in which you just sit there and say, hey man, I just hold the little gavel. I make sure that one person talks at a time, and I don't really inject myself into the proceedings. And the other is, hey man, I hold the gavel. And the guy who, and it's usually it's true. The guy who holds the gavel is the guy who sets the pace here and who makes the calls and controls the debate. And you certainly can, if you want to, insert yourself into this process. You're not the final word. That's not the way the Senate really works, but you can be highly influential. So what role is Chief Justice Roberts likely to take? For one thing, Roberts so far has kind of rarely exhibited any enthusiasm. Do we have that queued up? Yes.
Enthusiasm.
He's very rarely exhibiting any enthusiasm for injecting himself into the process and trying to direct things in general. He feels like he likes to project the idea that he is some sort of, hands-off minimalist, in keeping with what is supposed to be his conservative ideology, the old school conservative ideology. He has inserted himself at times, and sometimes rather dramatically, or even, you might say, if you're inclined to this, heroically. For instance, in the Affordable Care Act cases where he has found cause and to rescue the stability of the system anyway, and people think it's very often attributed to his interest in his legacy and maintaining the legitimacy of the institution that he nominally heads, the Supreme Court of the United States. Feels like that it's easy to understand why that might be important to a Chief Justice of the United States. Yes. Whether or not he's doing the best job possible at that, I don't know. Whether or not that's just self-interest, I guess you could think about it that way. Although I think that fits well within the framers' design for the role of self-interest in all of this, that everybody ought to be jealously guarding their prerogatives in each of the three branches, and that's what keeps things in balance. So you can reach your own conclusion on how well he's doing maintaining the independence and or institutional validity of the Supreme Court. But that doesn't matter, because he won't be presiding in the Supreme Court during an impeachment trial. He'll be presiding in the Senate, where presumably a conservatively oriented person like Roberts would be even more likely to want to take a hands-off approach. If maintaining the integrity of the Supreme Court as a separate and co-equal branch of the government is important to him, it may also likewise be of importance to him to say, although the role of presiding officer is imposed on me during a impeachment trial by the Constitution and I can't defy it, I should be mindful throughout that I'm essentially a guest here. I'm granted enormous power by the Constitution, but why would I want to exercise enormous power, especially when, to look at it cynically, my Republican colleagues, we regard Roberts as a Republican, though we're not, I guess, supposed to. My Republican colleagues in the political branches will take care of this and perhaps deliver precisely the outcome I would have been called upon to deliver as a Republican partisan if my role were different. But now I can hands off it and say I'm not biased toward Republicans and desirous of a Republican outcome in this. I am a hands-off kind of guy. And the comment that I threw in at the end just before the break was, you know how he is about balls and strikes. It would be the most comfortable thing that I think would be possible for Chief Justice Roberts to say, I'm not going to make rulings on anything. And I'm going to remind everybody constantly that, look, I was handed a set of ground rules by the Senate. Now, remember a few weeks ago when I got hung up on the idea that all the reporters were saying the Democrats are impeaching Donald Trump, and that it's the Democrats' hearings on impeachment against Donald Trump. And I was saying, it's true that they're the majority, and it's true that there are almost no Republicans. I mean, I guess depending on how you want to classify Justin Amash, joining Democrats in this effort. The bottom line truth is, no, this was the House of Representatives doing it. It just so happens that Republicans lost the House of Representatives some time ago, and it has a Democratic majority, but the House of Representatives is the one doing the impeaching. The committee on the judiciary is the one voting on those articles of impeachment. The actual House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence was the one conducting the depositions, headed by Democrats, but those were the official bodies doing the work. And I guess similarly here, you will have the opportunity for Chief Justice Roberts to say, the Senate is handling this trial. I am presiding, but the Senate gave me these rules. And I'm concerned here that there won't be equal treatment, that reporters will say that, maybe many viewers thought that they would, that the Chief Justice would step in and demand witnesses because that's what usually happens in a regular trial that we see in Article 3 court. And he, of course, comes from the Article 3 courts, and everybody expected this to be a little bit more like an Article 3 court proceeding. He may point to the rules and say, I'm sorry, the rules say there will be no witnesses. I'm just here to call balls and strikes under the rules that I was handed. Now, that happens to hand control of the proceedings to Republicans, but again, this is what I mean here, is I think that I fear that reporters will say, well, those are the Senate rules, and not say, well, those are the Republican rules, or those are the rules Republicans adopted for the trial of their Republican president before the Republican-controlled Senate. But I don't know that they will stand. You can stand up and demand it, and maybe we ought to start now so that they get used to the idea. But having prevailed upon them earlier to treat it as the body acting and not parties within the body acting, they may say, aha, you have a good point. We will, in fact, refer to the body instead. And, I don't know what to say about that, other than that doesn't seem right. But having asked for it ourselves, they can simply say, well, the request came too late to do it in the House side, and you got us, right? Dead to rights for the Senate, so we'll do it your way. Ironic. Anyway, the follow-up point that Neil then makes is that Chief Justice Roberts will strive to do impartial justice, even if McConnell won't. Open to question. He's more likely to want to strive to do impartial justice, either because he has a genuine belief in impartial justice, whereas McConnell does not, maybe, or because that's the way he sees his role. And I don't believe necessarily in impartial justice, and I have a very partisan desire to see this come out this way, but I do have the pressure of maintaining the institutional integrity of the Supreme Court. And so, because I can both act with that in mind and coincidentally just happen to be assured of a Republican outcome thanks to McConnell's partisanship, then I can play the aloof role that I need to play here. It's not me doing it, it's Republicans doing it. So I don't know how impartial the justice will be. It might be 100% awesome and fully pure impartiality. Or it could be total crap, and you're not likely to be able to tell the difference thanks to McConnell's work. But okay. But it was pointed out, Greg was saying, well, as Neil Katyal points out, a timely message from our Chief Justice in 2020, during which he says, we should reflect on our duty to judge without fear or favor, deciding each matter with humility, integrity, and dispatch, etc., etc. He didn't have to make that comment, but he did. But the question then is, did he make it because he has a high-minded belief in doing impartial justice, or did he make it because he feels it's his job to maintain the integrity of the Supreme Court so that when they later make decisions that favor Republicans and possibly Trump personally, he can say, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. We were just doing impartial justice, like we said, even though, or is he using the luxury of knowing that McConnell will steer things to a Republican outcome and he's going to get what he wants no matter what role he finds himself playing in all this. Neil goes on to say the case for blocking the witnesses is a really hard one. McConnell looks like he's protecting a guilty man with something to hide. This weekend's revelations in the Times make McConnell's position increasingly untenable. We should say it makes McConnell's position increasingly logically untenable. But in reality, of course, he can say, Well, this sure is uncomfortable, but my vote is no on the question of whether or not there will be witnesses. How could you possibly? It's increasingly untenable, Mitch. Didn't you hear us say that? Yes, I did hear you say that. Untenable, of course, means that I put myself in political danger by voting this way, but that's what I'm here to do. I don't care. All right, I'm in political danger. Or some of my other members are perhaps also in political danger. Now, those who I think are in the most political danger, 3 of them, I will allow to vote the other way. 4 of them I will not. All right, I said a total of 4 would not be permissible, and I'm okay with that, and so are they. And that's what we're going to get. But it's logically untenable, given the revelations, to go forward with the plan without witnesses, to which he would say, yes, I acknowledge that. However, here is the vote total. What? But that's totally illogical. I know, but look again at the numbers. There will be no witnesses. That's a perfectly possible and perfectly, unfortunately, I guess procedurally speaking, a perfectly valid outcome. Anyway, this I thought was an interesting point, too. Dems are giving Trump what he wanted. That's underappreciated, I think. That during the House proceedings, of course, Trump said he wanted witnesses to testify just in the Senate and not in the House, where he thought he could control things better because it was a majority of Republicans. For Democrats now to say, all right, the president said he wanted the trial to go this way, we feel like you can play it up, right? We feel he should get the trial he wanted because it's only fair after all. And of course, we're only interested in the trial that we wanted, I guess, if we are the Democrats. But it happens to coincide here. Interestingly, that would, of course, depend on Trump being embarrassed to switch sides on the issue and to start saying that he wants no witnesses. But that's not beyond him either. We've seen him switch sides a million times and then insist that he was always on this side, and the people who are quoting him as being on the other side last week are fake news. So again, keep in mind that underlying all of this is a perfect willingness on Trump's part, and an almost perfect willingness, at least, on McConnell's part to simply deny the reality of what happened or was said by either one or both of them last week, even if they said it themselves, and simply say the opposite. It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen when that's the case. Let's see. No surprise that Murkowski said she's concerned about it. Collins said she's open to having witnesses. I don't believe that one. Mitt Romney will be crucial. I don't really believe that either. But I mean, he'll be more worth looking at than, I don't know, Kennedy or Cruz, Cornyn. No one's going to look to them to switch sides on these things. Trump's, let's see, where else? There was the fact that he was acting like a guilty man. That's true. He doesn't know how else to act because he's been guilty all the time. That's nothing new. Yes, apart from witnesses, longstanding impeachment rules say the president is summoned to appear in the Senate when impeached. But I'm not so sure. Well, I don't know whether he's going to care. I'm summoned, so what? Or he might want to be there. I don't know how he's going to react to that. And that's really, I guess that's really it in terms of points of differentiation from where Neil Katyal is coming from. I don't put a great deal of, I think the bulk of that was spent on saying, I don't really necessarily believe that Chief Justice Roberts has any real ideological foundation for saying, for sticking to the idea that he wants impartial justice done. It was a high-minded speech, but an easy speech to make when you know it's a freebie, right? You know what the outcome is going to be. And, it's just as possible that he sees his role as putting up the window dressing of maintaining the court's independence and nothing else, because I don't have to do any of the heavy lifting of making sure that the case comes out the way I wanted it to come out. All right. There was another statement over the weekend that I think deserves some discussion as well. And I'm going to have to scroll back to try and find it here. But was Lawrence Tribe, who's been chiming in all the way through the Trump presidency as well, but it's certainly been very interesting to watch during the impeachment. And he threw out an interesting thought here. And I think there is an article attached to it. His tweet, though: when the Chief Justice administers the oath of impartiality to a senator who has said he will not be impartial, that would be Mitch McConnell and many others, he will need to decide, that is, the Chief Justice will need to decide what his own oath demands. I don't know that there's a specific oath that is administered. I'm not sure. You would think so. But, I mean, his own current oath of office covers this as well. But there might actually be an additional oath administered to the Chief Justice before sitting to preside at an impeachment trial. And it's pretty easy to find that out, just not easy to do and still do a radio show at the same time. But we'll check it out. He'll have his own oath and the own demands of his oath. And he'll have to decide whether his oath to impartially interpret the law as a Supreme Court justice, or whether there's another oath as presiding officer in an impeachment trial. And he'll have to say, does my oath to impartially decide on the law or impartially preside over this trial mean that if I see Mitch McConnell say, I'm going to work hand in glove with the White House, we're going to set up the trial the way the White House wants the trial to go, and I'm under no obligation to be impartial. I know from the start, I'm happy to say publicly on the record that this impeachment is a joke, and I'm going to treat it that way, and my vote is not to convict, and that's that no matter what happens. I don't care what is presented as evidence in trial. I don't care what emerges between now and then. Does the Chief Justice as presiding officer say, if I have an oath to uphold the impartiality of the proceedings, and the first thing I have to do is administer an oath that I know the people taking, or at least one of the people taking the oath, is lying about as I administer it, do I have to do something here? As Tribe puts it, when the Chief Justice administers the oath of impartiality to a senator who has said he will not be impartial, the Chief Justice will need to decide what his own oath demands and whether he has jurisdiction to rule on a motion to recuse that senator for cause, or to cause that senator to recuse himself, or just have them stand aside from taking the oath or not participate as a juror. That is a curious question. And I guess it does require that. Now, what happens as a result of that requirement is anybody's guess. But I knew what the objection to that comment was going to be as soon as it was made. And as it turns out, the article attached to it is by Adam Liptak at the New York Times, and perhaps we'll take a look at it in further discussion. But I knew what people would say. And those of you who have followed all the procedural discussions we've had know, for instance, perhaps, that it's the Senate that will decide this stuff by itself and for itself. And like we were just discussing, the likelihood of Chief Justice Roberts imposing his will on the Senate just doesn't seem like it fits with his character, if that's what you want to, if that's the word you want to use. It doesn't naturally occur to us when we're thinking about Chief Justice Roberts, about him imposing himself in this way. He will think of himself largely as a guest. There's nothing about the job description provided for us in the Constitution here that says that the Chief Justice has to set himself up as the chief arbiter of legal points. But there is something in the Constitution that tells us that if the Senate feels put upon by the Chief Justice, and a Chief Justice who wants to take on that role and say, I will rule, for instance, on the question of, or in this case, I will rule on the question of whether or not a senator who has said before taking the oath that he intends to violate that oath should be administered that oath. He has the jurisdiction I think. But Chief Justice Roberts is the kind of person who might very well look at this and say, well, I don't have the jurisdiction to rule, and so I won't, and we'll just leave it at that. But he could say, I have a problem. I'm supposed to do this stuff impartially and properly, and ordinarily, if a person is about to take the oath as a juror and they've said to me, and I've taken judicial notice of the fact that they've said, I don't intend to honor this oath, I don't want to administer this oath. I can't be said to have done my job properly and upheld my oath if I administer this oath to that person. But he could also say that knowing full well that the Senate would say, no, you don't have that jurisdiction. That's not your job. We'll take it away from you. And with 51 votes, reverse his assertion of jurisdiction and reverse his ruling that the oath ought not to be administered to Mitch McConnell or whoever else would be willing to make the same statements. So bottom line is that the Senate can overrule him. Now, a lot of people sort of left it there and said, well, because the Senate can overrule him, then Lawrence Tribe is talking out of his hat, we might say, because it's foolish to make the objection that the Chief Justice ought to make a ruling at all, given that we know the Senate can overrule him and we know what the composition of the Senate is politically and that they will overrule him. Fine. My appreciation for what Tribe says here is that's okay. I fully anticipate that the fact that a partisan Senate could overrule the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on what looks on its face like a matter of law. On the other hand, if we're going to have this fight and we're going to seat jurors who have said, I refuse to be impartial, then if that's what the trial is going to look like, then I want a moment on C-SPAN 2, live in front of America, to watch the Republicans vote and put themselves on record as holding themselves out as a more authoritative source of judicial interpretation than the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. I would like to see that. I know what the outcome is going to be, and that will sadden me, but I'm going to get that outcome one of two ways. Either with a declaration that they hold themselves above the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court when it comes to legal matters because they want such and such a political outcome, or without it, and it remains secret and unspoken that they hold themselves in their politics above the law in the United States of America. That they are, in fact, on record, putting party over country. Would you like to have that vote first on television, or would you like to allow them to continue to hide it? The outcome is the same, but you either get a vote to hide it, or rather you get no vote and it's hidden, or you get an outright declaration at the outset, I suppose the part of the impeachment trial that people are most likely to watch, the very beginning, if not perhaps only exceeded by the very end, the vote to acquit or convict, or not. I'll take the televised vote to put party over country. Thanks. So that's the bottom line of it. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want that vote to take place. And I would say, therefore, I ask, is there any good reason not to make this motion? Remember, what Lawrence Tribe is asking here is, if someone were to make a motion that the Chief Justice has got jurisdiction to rule, or rather, the motion, I guess, is, well, you could make that motion too, but the Chief Justice's question, do I have jurisdiction to rule on a motion that some senator, Mitch McConnell, be asked to recuse himself as a juror, be asked to stand aside from taking the oath, to not be permitted to sit as a juror? That's not an outcome the Chief Justice is going to give us, but the motion could be made nonetheless. Now, if the motion is made then he'll either have to say, I will rule, and decide to rule in favor of the idea that that senator ought to stand aside, or no, it's not actually required. It's expected that you'll be impartial, but it's not actually required, and it would be too difficult for us to impose on the Senate, and it's not something I'm going to do as an outsider, et cetera, et cetera. Or he could just rule, I don't even have the jurisdiction to make that choice. But either way, the question will have been asked and a vote will be cast. And if the Chief Justice were to rule one way or the other, someone would say, I make a motion to overrule the Supreme Court Justice, no matter who it is. Maybe a smart play would be for the Chief Justice to rule in favor of the idea and force Democrats or against the idea and force Democrats to say, we want to overrule the justice. I don't know. Anyway, the point is the motion should be made and there's no reason not to make it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Did you get where we were going with all this? Essentially, I would love to have that vote rather than not have anything happen. And I'm fully aware that the Senate can overrule him, but I'd like to make them do it on the record. And I can think of no good reason why you wouldn't make the motion. The reasons most often offered, despite the fact that I asked for a good reason, was that, well, you know what the outcome is going to be and you're going to lose the vote. Yes, but like I said, I can think of no reason why you wouldn't want to put Senate Republicans on record at the outset as voting explicitly for party over country before going into the trial that you already have told me. You, too, have agreed that you believe that the outcome will be that at the end, the Republicans will vote party over country. Okay, wouldn't you rather have them do that twice than just once? And I can't think of the reason why you wouldn't want that. Yes, you'll lose, but then why have a Senate trial at all? You've agreed to have a Senate trial. You've agreed that that's the right thing to do in capitalization, with capitalized articles and everything. And why would it not be the right thing to do at the outset as well as at the end? I don't know. But a lot of people seem to think that losing is reason enough. But yeah, the fact is that you can force themselves to declare themselves as the party of party over country right away, and to not do it because of some sense that, well, we'll lose the vote and therefore it either doesn't matter or will make us look like losers or something, puts me in mind of that, at the time, terrifying and disgusting and disappointing feeling, and then later terrifying, disgusting and disappointing if you only took notice of the moment when the movie Fahrenheit 9/11 came out and showed you that how the electoral college count for George W. Bush's first so-called election after the year 2000 went down in January of 2001. That was, the focal point at the beginning of the Michael Moore movie, Fahrenheit 9/11, when they replayed that fateful moment where House members, Democratic House members, were standing one after the other, insisting that they registered objections to going ahead with the electoral vote count given the irregularities in vote counting in Florida, and were repeatedly informed by Al Gore, presiding over his own electoral college loss counting loss anyway, in the joint session, insisting that a sitting senator had to make the same objection in order for there to be proceedings during the joint session on the question of what to do about the Electoral College count. And no Democratic senator, no Republican senator for that matter, no independent senator for that matter, would make such an objection. And, the history will show that it was at Al Gore's urging, and, we could do a whole show on the wisdom of that. But bottom line is that Democratic House members said there's something wrong with verifying the Electoral College count, given what we know about how the votes were counted in Florida. If you go forward, history will record, for whatever reason, that George W. Bush is the president of the United States. And not only do we not want that politically, but we don't want that institutionally if he's not. Right? Then the scene played out again, slightly differently, in 2004. And I think there were probably fewer people at that point, history having been written that George W. Bush was the president anyway, and having lived through 4 years of it anyway, and then people having been cowed post 9/11 into not opposing the president for slightly different reasons. But again, the objections were raised by people in the House of Representatives who faced the same political situation overall in the country, but still stood and made that objection. And once again, the Senate stood mute and said nothing at this second crux of history in 4 years. Now, fast forward a little bit to 2017, early 2017, when we're counting the electoral votes in the supposed election of Donald Trump as president of the United States. And once again, objection is raised in the House. And once again, the Senate stands mute. And there was all kinds of problems, and we could have hoped that this time around, that the members of the Electoral College themselves would have spoken up and said something. But no, all our hands are tied, just like we expect now Chief Justice Roberts to say, I objected too, and I preferred this, but my hands were tied by the rules I was handed by the Senate. Electoral College members said, our hands are tied too. Like I said, we could do a whole other show. We have done whole other shows pointing out that this clearly is a demonstration of the fact that the Electoral College just doesn't work, and was never took on the role that it was supposed to take on in the first place. And all the lecturing about putting the actual election of the president in the hands of the Electoral College instead of directly in the popular vote. It was supposed to protect against, the ludicrous election of some populist demagogue as president of the United States if you just left the decision to the idiots among the people. But of course, the people opted for the other person. But no, we can't have that. We got to preserve the quote-unquote election of the idiot demagogue. So it's completely backwards. So, I mean, if you thought the Electoral College was dumb just on its face from last time we elected somebody who was the popular vote loser but Electoral College quote-unquote winner, well, now you really have reason to doubt its validity. Anyway, once again, objections raised. Once again, the Senate stands mute. This is a bad habit, United States Senate, although more specifically, we could address ourselves to the Democrats in the Senate. 3 times since the year 2000, and I remind you, it is only now just the year 2020. So in 20 years, in 3 points, critical points, where the question before you was, are we 100% sure that the person we're about to give the nuclear button to won and is entitled to be the president of the United States? 3 times already they've said, well, that's going to make us look a little fruity, don't you think? A little loopy if we say this. Well, I don't know. Members of the House of Representatives are saying it. You don't think you could say, look, I don't really know, but they raise a valid question. Let's see how it goes. Well, the answer in their mind was, well, we're going to lose the vote, so why bother? And it hasn't been a good look for Democrats in the Senate. Now a fourth opportunity to stand up for your colleagues in the House and for, members of your party, if you like to think of things that way, or your country, if you prefer to think of things that way. Circumstances are certainly different. Trump has been different in kind all along, right? So now a fourth opportunity arises not in the context of the Electoral College, but in the context of, are we going to administer the oath to senators to sit as a juror in the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, even though they've said, I intend to violate that? Are we going to have a vote on whether or not there are going to be witnesses? Are we going to, make a little bit of a mess here and again? The opportunity will come again if someone has the guts to do it. If the Senate were to adopt by brute force ground rules excluding all witnesses, but Democrats, the Democratic managers, let's say, in the House, the House managers sent to the Senate to manage the trial, are convinced of the necessity of a witness, but are likewise convinced that the rules preclude witnesses. Will they make the motion to call the witness anyway and allow themselves to be overruled and perhaps look to a Democratic senator to appeal the ruling of the chair and put Republicans on public record with a vote again, even though they know they're going to lose? Or will they stand mute again and let history simply record that they didn't have a goddamn thing to say? And look, as far as history is concerned, the Senate had no objection to this. Did the Senate have an objection to this at all? The objection existed. Do you want the record to say that the Senate had no objection? Or did you want the record to say objection was heard, but a vote was held and the objections were overruled? And it could be a 99-1 vote that you might be embarrassed about. But what if it was a 53-47 vote? How will history record that? Well, record it as 57-43, but people will understand. No, rather, 53-47. But people will understand what that means should they bother to look at the record. Not everybody will. Very few people will. But should it be there? My argument is yes, it should be there. So that's basically what I'm thinking. I know what the outcome of the vote is going to be, but do you want to make them have the vote? And I thought all along that the answer was always yes. And I will be disappointed to find out that the answer is now no. Again. And, kind of outraged. And I hinted at that in tweeting it. I watched the Senate stand mute for objections raised to the Electoral College count in 2001, and again in 2005 and 2017. Please don't do it again in this impeachment trial. Some senator, couldn't we find, we're in a presidential year. Wouldn't you like to find out that one of the almost 50 Democratic senators now in office had the courage to open their damn mouth? Just one out of the 4 times that history could hinge on what they have to say. It's interesting how many of them were running for president, but have apparently, or I'm afraid they might have nothing to say. They might be struck mute when the door cracked open just that much to color the way history is recorded. You wanted to be president of the United States. You really have nothing to say at this point? That would be shocking. But it would also be par for the course, which, I don't want to demotivate Democratic voters here, but I've seen this a lot. And it's getting kind of annoying. Okay, so let me just put that one out there on the table and see if you want to think about that. Okay. Slightly less import out there are a few items. Why not just call some of them out? First of all, I guess over the last couple of days we learned that war criminal Eddie Gallagher is launching a lifestyle brand. So if you want to become or dress like a war criminal, that option is now available to you. I've seen a couple people discussing the impropriety of that and conjuring up such Saturday Night Live scenarios as bad idea jeans. Thanks to Bobble Speak, our good friend Culture of Truth, who follows along. Yeah, that's pretty weird that that's happening. People are pointing out the absurdity of it, but there you are. Two, in another shocking update, I'm surprised that this was necessary, but I'm glad it's been done. Apparently, Snopes has checked into the question of whether, maybe you have had this question, you've seen me use this picture, the December 2019 photo of Donald Trump with, as they say here, two markedly different skin tones on his face, where he applied his bronzer, but did so with astonishing delineation between the treated and untreated skin surfaces on his face. Which, by the way, I thank him immensely for delivering me one of the best straight lines I've ever gotten. Over the weekend, over the New Year's break, Trump has taken to retweeting a no-name lawyer of some sort, allegedly a lawyer, whose name I've never heard. And maybe now he's famous because they've put him on Fox as an analyst, and I think because of what he's been saying. But he just tweets, supportive, pseudo-legalistic arguments in favor of Trump with respect to the impeachment. It was a very stupid one that he recently retweeted. Anyway, one of the comments that this pseudo-lawyer was making was that he found, he said, in my opinion, the impeachment articles are, as he said, using a little bit of lingo here, are defective on their face. That is to say, they are immediately recognizable as invalid, defective. But that's the terminology, defective on their face, which to me was like the ultimate straight line from Donald Trump, who retweeted these comments. Like, you want to talk about something that's defective on its face? I have news for you, Donald Trump. Have you looked in the mirror? And I used that picture of him with that ridiculous line. I don't know why. It's almost like he put some sort of a face mask thing on. It's that clear, where he stopped applying his makeup. And I'm amazed that passed the mirror test for him. His eyesight is failing. I forget about that. And that must be what's really happening here. I mean, it really is kind of a sad thing. It's just, that's what happens with age, and eyesight is failing. And I mean that, sincerely. He just doesn't catch these things. One of the old tropes about visiting the elderly relatives, or the old widow who lives in the creepy haunted house down the street or whatever, is that the place is full of cobwebs. It occurred to me recently why that was the case. It's not that old people love spiders. It's that old people whose eyesight is failing, was they're cleaning up their house. They either can't see, or even if they can see, they can't reach it. They can't get to those corners. They don't see the cobwebs. They think the place is clean because they can't see that. Other people can see it and, come away with this weird idea that old people like spiders. That's not what's happening here. Here, he's looking in the mirror and he can't see, for whatever reason, that he's missed huge swaths of his face. But Snopes says, I guess a lot of people felt certain that was photoshopped, that it had been edited to embarrass the president. Snopes says, nope. There, that kind of rhymes. Snopes says, according to Mark Elliott, is tweeting this, and I guess, I don't know, there's no link. Maybe we should check that out. But he says, Snopes says that this photo showing Donald Trump with two markedly different skin tones on his face was authentic and unedited. However, I am telling you right now that he should have included a link in that and didn't. And so now that still holds it open to question. But I'll mark it for all of you to share that after the show. But that's a big part of my own tweeting over the last couple of days, and really just the most egregious example of it that I've ever seen. But there was another one also recently circulated showing pretty much the same effect, so you shouldn't doubt it. Let's see. I guess I'll make a note to myself as I collect those that I also want to see if I can find that bonkers lawyer and his tweets. Speaking again of Chief Justice John Roberts, another comment that I wanted to add to the fact that he has given this end-of-year message here. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, according to Axios, tweets that the Chief Justice warned that Americans may, quote, take democracy for granted in his annual year-end message. And I don't know where he came up with the idea that he had to issue such a message, but I guess that's just sort of a thing he's come up with. Our Axios seems to think it's a thing, an annual thing for him. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of point out some small irony in all this. I mean, it's not his fault that the Constitution gives him this job in this fashion, but it is pretty interesting. A remarkable thing to say for a guy who is serving for life at the head of our highest and unreviewable legal authority in this country. He cannot be gainsaid after his institution, the Supreme Court, speaks. I mean, there are checks and balances as against the Supreme Court. They do exist, but they're the final word on legal interpretation, and he has that job until he dies, or until he decides to call it quits. This is sort of an interesting thing. To get appointed to that job for life, to be confirmed in that job by essentially a gerrymandered Senate, the odd lines being those of the state boundaries, of course, but the effect being just the same, and you can't appeal. I mean, he's right, but it's just an interesting thing maybe that's why you should give it extra weight. I don't know. It's just sort of an interesting note to take along with you. All right, let's see. By the way, was there something of particular interest in that Adam Liptak story or opinion piece that was attached to the Lawrence Tribe tweet? I'm curious about that. Impeachment trial looming. Chief Justice reflects on judicial independence. So it's a report about his year-end comments. So I'll include that for you, even though it's wrapped up or embedded in the Lawrence Tribe tweet. But you might want to take a moment to review that as well. Let's see. In other small bore news, I thought I would share with you at least the headline of Aldous J. Pennyfarthing's, I love that name, diary over at Daily Kos, just to catch you up with the weirdness of Donald and Melania over the New Year's holiday. I guess being stopped on their way into the New Year's Eve party and asked what their New Year's resolutions were. Melania, I feel bad for her because English being a second language, but she's pretty good at it. But she blurted out, how did she put it? Peace on the world, which is interesting because the English phrase is peace on earth, generally speaking. But earth is the world for us, and peace, you would say peace in the world, I suppose, or peace for the world, peace on the world. I don't know really. Oh, I just got it. She's accented. This is it. Yeah. She says, what are you going to do? What's your New Year's resolution for the year? Peace on the world. I just got it. That's it. That's the person who wore the jacket. I don't really care, do you? Right? Piss on the world is what she's actually saying. We thought she must be saying peace on the world, although that's stilted English. We forgive it because she's foreign born and she's trying so hard. And most people probably did wish for peace in the world. She actually wished to piss on the world. That's amazing. Well, bad job normalizing, everybody. Donald Trump was asked the same question, of course, and he answered it in many more words. As he says, peace is right. Thank you. Peace is right, but I'm not sure you're supposed to say a resolution out loud. he says, because you'll jinx it. And, Aldous catches what's going on here and says, in his title, Idiot First Couple Confuses New Year's Resolutions with Birthday Wishes. Yes, Donald Trump, those are the ones you're not supposed to say out loud. New Year's resolutions, I suppose you could, as a matter of practice, keep them to yourself. It would be wise to do, because given the frequency with which they're broken, but it's a very frequently asked question. What is your New Year's resolution? Of course, it's frequently asked, what did you wish for when you're blowing out candles on a birthday cake? And frequently the answer is, I won't tell you. Though sometimes people blurt it out too. And he's a blurter. He is. But anyway, at least I think we uncovered the more important part of that. Piss on the world was her actual answer. Everyone else thought she said peace. We know the real truth here in among our listenership. Thanks also for the online crowdsourced production effort from our friend known online as Warfare Class on Twitter, or Employee of the Month, if you prefer going with that handle. But thanks to Warfare Class for digging up the Snopes article and providing that. Let's take a quick look. Is this an authentic photograph of President Trump? Dan McGill, writing on the 27th for Snopes, and I guess says, yeah. Is it an authentic photograph? A photograph of Trump posted online by a Republican congressman, irony, prompted much speculation about the president's skincare regimen. That's not really what that is. That's just makeup application, but okay. Interesting. It says unproven. What do you think about that? What are we going to say now? Is that so? Are people who are tweeting about it being true, according to Snopes, wrong? Claim a December 2019 photograph showing Donald Trump with two markedly different skin tones on his face was authentic and unedited. Rating unproven. Is there writing about it? There's the origin. In December 2019, we received multiple inquiries from readers about a widely shared photograph of Trump, which appeared to show him looking ridiculous, right, as they say, with a somewhat unusual color gradient along the side of his face, an artifact some observers attributed to the uneven application of spray tan or makeup. On December 21st, for example, the left-leaning website The Political Flare, never heard of it, published an article about the picture under the headline, Trump had a severe makeup mishap at the White House Christmas party, and now he's an absolute laughingstock. I mean, he was anyway. They're correct in that. A clip of their reporting, which is very funny, but I don't think we have time for. Let's see. Democratic Underground followed suit. Photograph in question was also shared multiple, often unflattering social media Twitter posts. Here are one or two of them. And now what? Let's get to the conclusion here. The man shown to Trump's left in the photograph was Representative Chuck Fleischmann, a Republican of Tennessee. Never heard of that guy, but on the evening of December 12th, Fleischmann, or a member of his team, posted the photograph to both his Twitter and Facebook accounts. So we have that. He's the one who posted it. The photograph appears to have been snapped at the White House Congressional Ball, which took place on the evening of December 12th, as we could find no earlier instance of the photograph other than those posted online by Fleischmann on that date. The image appears to be authentic. Here we are. Since Fleischmann is a strong supporter of Trump's, and it seems unlikely he would arrange for the image to be digitally altered before publication so as to create the false appearance of a non-existent skin tone demarcation on the president's face. I like the terminology. However, we cannot rule out the possibility, however unlikely, that either Fleischmann or a member of his staff, for whatever reason, arranged for the photograph to be digitally manipulated, or that the photograph was not originally posted by the congressman, that he or his staff found the image posted elsewhere after it was edited by a third party, and that they subsequently posted it. The original post could have been deleted, leaving the impression that Fleischmann was the original poster. Since we can't rule out the possibility that Fleischmann or his team either digitally altered the photograph or reposted an already altered version, we are issuing a verdict of unproven regarding the authenticity of the image, and that will be misconstrued, I am sure. It's worth noting, and we'll be the judge of that any possible digital alteration need not have been malicious. Various smartphones and apps feature editing software that allows users to filter apply filters or color schemes to photographs, modifications which can artificially change the appearance of images. It's also possible that the photograph was not edited, but the angle from which it was taken, perhaps in combination with the lighting in that part of the room, as the president has claimed, right, contributed to exaggerating a color gradient on Trump's face, which was in reality much more subtle. Several other photographs of the president from that same event do not exhibit him with the same stark demarcation in skin tone, although they do not show the opposite side of his face either. So you never know, but I guess that's the answer. At least now we know why it was registered as unproven. I think they probably could have made a better guess than that. But there you have it. Sounds to me like it's actually true, unless you want to blame it on a Republican congressman, which I'm fine with too. I guess either way, it's an outcome I'm happy with. In the meantime, speaking of outcomes you're happy with or I'm happy with, next up, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. You got to be happy with an outcome like that, and I can even tell you why if I skip over to his offered up summary of what he's got in store for you. Let's see. An investigative report revealed what happened after the 2017 tax cuts were signed into law, allegedly, and the corporate lobbying blitz began.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Interesting news from the state of Florida. Have you heard of it? A white nationalist who ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida was arrested for kidnapping and weapons charges. That seems like an unusual development, except for the fact, of course, that it happened in Florida. Much more from around the world and right here in the old United States of America coming up next. Stay tuned.